Sincere thanks for the privilege of speaking to you all today on this vital topic. When I use the word vital, I mean it in its truest sense, which is necessary for life. And I'll get into that more in my remarks today. But firstly, I want to thank the organizers for their foresight and their perseverance. Cabo Verde was mentioned. I think we were talking about this way back then with Minister Vitorino. The subject matter, there's no avoiding it. It's of great importance and consequence for the world's ocean community. So on their behalf, I want to offer a hand of gratitude to the presidency of the regional government of Madeira, and as well to Forum Oceano and to the Portuguese Navy, and to the IFCN and the Economists' World Ocean Initiative. Secondly, may I say that what a pleasure it is to be back in Macaronesia, the islands of the fortunate, as the ancient Greeks so aptly called them. You may know that I'm from Fiji, which sits on the border of Polynesia and Melanesia, again, Greek-derived words. And as a fellow islander, I say to Madeirans, I suggest to you that you are indeed most fortunate to be the people of this beautiful island. For the warm welcome that you've extended, I say muito obrigado. On November 21st last year, a major victory occurred in the drive to protect the ocean's well-being. This date marked the regional government of Madeira's announcement of the creation of the biggest marine protected area in the North Atlantic, when it approved the Selvagens Islands Nature Reserves, MPA, extensively widening the protection of the waters of these remote islands. In an area bounded by 12 nautical miles around the islands, the Selvagens Marine Protected Area covers a territory of 2,677 square kilometers, with all species existing there and fully protected from extractive activities such as fishing and minerals exploitation. Now, I know you already all know this, but the speech is being made available to the media, so we'll get their facts right for them. This immense MPA will serve to increase marine biodiversity, the genetic richness of the biomass, and the reproductive capacity of the species therein. It also boosts the integrity of surrounding ecosystems, thereby contributing to better marine conservation throughout the Northeast Atlantic. And so first and foremost, on behalf of the ocean, I'm here to, in Madeira today to say again, thank you to the regional government and people of Madeira for declaring the Selvagens MPA. There can be no healthy planet without a healthy ocean, and the ocean's health is measurably in decline. In these challenging times, we have an immediate moral and empirical imperative to reverse that decline. And it's by moving forward with such measures as the Selvagens MPA that we will do so. Thus, once more, on behalf of a long-suffering ocean, I say to all Madeirans, muito obrigado. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the economy of the ocean is the 7th largest economy globally in GDP terms. But many of its sectors that rely on a healthy seascape are losing value under a business-as-usual management regime. Therefore, there's strong economic incentive to protecting 30% of the ocean in effective MPAs, and I'll say a bit more about that. In the islands of the Pacific, we're well aware of our responsibilities as small island developing states with large oceanic territories to attend to the well-being of our relationship with the ocean, as set out within the provisions of the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea, and indeed under the UN's universally agreed Sustainable Development Goal 14, to conserve and sustainably use the ocean's resources. As such, we have ample experience of the costs and benefits of declaring MPAs, and I'm sure that these are very much on your minds when you consider the Selvagens Islands Marine Protected Area. I'll therefore address these costs and benefits in what remains of my speaking time this morning. Let's start with the benefits. And I will begin with that moral and empirical imperative to which I've just referred. Based upon the very best advice available from the world's leading scientists, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, has declared a red alert for humanity. He has told us in no uncertain terms that we've been waging war against nature, undermining the planetary support systems, life support systems, and it's time that we make peace with nature. And only the reckless, obviously, would want otherwise. So we must go to where the vast majority of the planet's living space exists to make that peace, and that, of course, is the ocean. To do the right thing by the ocean, we have agreed through SDG 14 that the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity is required. And the direct corollary of that decision is urgent identification, establishment, and management of ecologically representative, well-connected, well-managed networks of effective marine protected areas around the world. So while we're lagging in this work, the good news is that there is mounting evidence pointing to the huge benefits of MPAs, provided they are underpinned by effective financial support. It's also been conclusively demonstrated that the cost of inaction far exceeds the cost of implementation. For example, the high-level panel to which the Minister has just referred, the high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy on which the Prime Minister of Portugal serves. It's a group of 17 serving heads of state and government informed by leading global ocean experts and practitioners. It's commissioned a series of expert ocean reports, including one on the ocean as a solution for climate change. This report demonstrates that full implementation of just 5 ocean-based climate solutions could deliver 1/5 of the annual greenhouse gas emission cuts the world needs by 2050 to keep global temperature rise below that 1.5 existential 1.5 degrees Celsius global warming. One of these 5 solutions is the conservation of blue carbon ecosystems to prevent further release of GHG emissions and scale up restoration efforts. The report makes it clear that the most effective way of implementing that solution is through the establishment and effective management of area-based marine conservation measures called for under the target of SDG 14.5. In short, ladies and gentlemen, as I said, marine protected areas are vital to our survival. By preserving and restoring biodiversity and recovering biomass in the marine environment, MPAs generate these wide-ranging benefits. This is not confined to climate stability, for it's clearly proven that food security is another beneficiary. Think just of the fact that many of the fish species protected in Selvagens Islands move out of the breeding grounds of the MPA to where they're of significant commercial interest to the fisheries sector. In fact, food security is one of the main supporting reasons why more than 110 nations are now calling for the protection of at least 30% of the marine environment by 2030. 30 by 30. It's a massive challenge. 110 nations believe that that is the right way to go. With MPAs providing huge benefits as a public good, it logically follows that governments are their natural stewards and should therefore take responsibility for the governance and funding of MPAs. But this does not preclude partnerships with others in the execution of this responsibility, or indeed of creating novel means to achieve the desired success in governance and funding. Such approaches are more than appropriate and should be actively fostered and encouraged, particularly in the case of developing countries and in island environments like Madeira, with limited sources of government revenue. While we rightly expect the primary role in this field to be filled by governments, we should also recognize broader ocean users with their vested interests in a healthy ocean, justifying commensurate responsibilities for funding of MPAs. There's no doubt that meeting a 30% MPA coverage target will entail huge expenditure, but these are entirely reasonable costs with corresponding benefits for many sectors, from tourism to fisheries, from offshore energy to shipping, from healthy marine ecosystems to healthy coastal communities and cities. One study estimates the global cost of 30% MPA coverage as being somewhere between $5 and $19 billion US per annum. While that estimate may appear daunting, we should gain courage from the fact that over 20 billion US dollars of public monies are being spent annually in the form of harmful fisheries subsidies. These subsidies go largely to industrial fishing fleets, resulting in overcapacity, overfishing, and in some cases, illegal fishing. Is it any surprise that 34% of global fish stocks are fished beyond biologically sustainable levels? Since the World Trade Organization's Ministerial Council has finally agreed, after 20 years of negotiation, has finally agreed to end these harmful subsidies, fisheries subsidies, let us all do what we can to divert the movement of these public monies into the direction of MPA funding. Think of such action not just as smart use of public funds for our self-protection on this planet, but also as reparation to nature for the damages done to marine ecosystems by our subsidies over the decades. So, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as an islander myself, I'd like to emphasize that at the moment, developing countries, often with very limited resources, host an outsized share of MPAs and bear an outsized share of the cost of their governance. Some of the world's biggest EEZs are home to the establishment of what could be the most environmentally desirable locations for MPAs. But some of the same countries are in economic terms amongst the least developed and poorest countries of the international community. Their scarce national resources are required for basic food services like health and food, and security and energy and education. It makes no sense for us to expect them to forego licensing revenues from foreign fishing fleets, or indeed to meet the cost of governing enormous oceanic MPAs without external assistance. This quandary presents the perfect opportunity for meaningful, enduring partnerships and novel ways of funding MPAs so that they can be revenue positive rather than a drain on meager national resources. A recent cooperative study by the UN Environment, UNEP, in tandem with Oceans 5, Bloomberg Philanthropies, the Waite Foundation, and Oceana Azul in Lisbon, produced a discussion paper on marine protected area finance, status, and future directions. Their combined thoughts and efforts are praiseworthy, presenting a number of interesting initiatives in this field. And I'd like to highlight one of the study's outcomes because I believe it is worthy of multilateral action without delay. The paper proposes the formation of a global conservation trust fund, or an ocean sustainability bank, to draw in private capital and ensure equitable financial administration. In doing so, it proposes that the transfer of the funds to the needy regions I've just described must be efficient, with assurances built in ensuring resources get to where they're required for the offsets and effective governance. I believe that incorporating small fees on major industries would provide all the funding required for such an ocean sustainability bank. These fees would be entirely proportional to the benefits they receive from the ocean, and fair outflows from the fund, they would then go to the regions and countries bearing the cost of MPA creation and governance. A prime source of funding could well be international shipping. If shipping were a country, it would rank as the world's 6th biggest greenhouse gas emitter. If you drive a goods truck on a motorway, you pay a toll. And increasingly, if such a vehicle enters an inner city, it pays again. But ships sail on the ocean as if the high seas belong to everyone, and indeed they do, which is why international shipping should be paying a toll for the privilege of passage across our shared domain. I have spoken to representatives of some of the world's biggest shipping companies, and each of them agreed with me, admittedly in private, that the shipping industry would not even blink if a small toll were imposed across the board for this purpose. An ocean sustainability bank could well provide integrated financing tools beyond EEZs within area-based management in the high seas as part of the expected outcomes from the ongoing BBNJ conference. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a tide in the affairs of men which, taken at the flood, leads on to fortune. As the peerless scribe put it, on such a full sea are we now afloat. After the forceful push of the G7 ocean deal, with its determined commitment to end SDG 14's financing gap, and the strident call from the UN Ocean Conference in Lisbon for greater funding of SDG 14 and the sustainable blue economy, we must take the current while it serves. Carefully negotiated by the UN member states, the political declaration that was adopted by consensus at the conclusion of the UN Ocean Conference in Lisbon states that innovative financial solutions must now be found to drive transformation towards sustainable ocean-based economies and the scaling up of nature-based solutions. To deliver on these undertakings, we have urgent work to do. Over the next 3 months, UNFCCC's COP27 awaits us in Egypt, as does the G20 summit in Indonesia and the CBD COP15 in Montreal. At these critical multilateral fora, let it be heard loud and clear that sustainable ocean finance needs an effective, well-resourced funding institution to do the work set out for us by the UN Ocean Conference's Universal Political Declaration. It should be understood by all that the time has come to move the climate finance needle decisively in the direction of ocean-based mitigation and adaptation. So, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, many other initiatives for the funding of MPAs have been put forward, and indeed some are already in practice. Time dictates that I just touch briefly upon them today, but I commend them to you for further discussion at this conference. Public budget allocations, tourism fees, donor-supported conservation trust funds. These are all commonly employed financial mechanisms for marine protected areas. The world's first blue bond was issued by the government of Seychelles back in 2018, with a view to supporting the expansion of the archipelago's MPAs. My own country, Fiji, announced a blue bond plan last year to raise $50 million US for investments to deliver a sustainable blue economy. So blue bonds have the potential to be good for the marine environment and good for coastal communities and good for the investors. And as such, they should be viewed as positive catalyzers for monetizing ocean economies, with a sustainable business model basing their competitiveness on a healthy ocean. But they're not for everyone, and for smaller countries, blue bonds issuance poses limitations due to public debt issues. So around the world, valorization of natural capital is well underway. And I have absolutely no doubt that more novel approaches will be developed in our battle to meet the challenges of climate change mitigation and adaptation. Blue carbon, the blue carbon assets are amongst our greatest allies. Again, I'll use that existential word. They're absolutely vital to our well-being. I'm thus convinced that the worldwide drive for CSR, corporate social responsibility, and ESG, environmental, social, and governance criteria, leading on to meaningful investment in nature-based solutions, will see the rational development of an international market for blue carbon. Indications are that this will happen in the near term, and frankly, the sooner the better. Before I close, I'd like to give a shout out to my colleagues at IUCN who are working towards the high ambition for the Impact Conference in Vancouver, and to my colleagues and friends at UNEP and their partners who are building an MPA tool and learning platform. And I know they're looking for support from interested actors such as yourselves to further develop a common, strong knowledge resource on MPA design and implementation for the global MPA community. So let's get together on this in pursuance of the Ocean Decade of Ocean Science and the UN Decade of Ocean Science and the UN Decade for Ecosystem Restoration. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, to date, 2022 has been a very positive year for the implementation of SDG 14. From the outcomes of the One Ocean Summit in Brest to UNEA 5 in Nairobi, from the Our Ocean Conference in Palau to Stockholm Plus 50, from the Ocean Climate Dialogue in Bonn to the WTO Ministerial Meeting in Geneva, not forgetting the great forward surge of the UN Ocean Conference in Lisbon. And now we have this Marine Protected Area Conference here in Madeira today to add to the evidence of progress. From here, we forge on to the high-level week in New York next week, to the UNFCCC COP27 in Egypt and the G20 summit in Indonesia, and the Convention on Biological Diversity, COP15 in Montreal. And not forgetting the International Marine Protected Areas Conference, Impact 5, in Vancouver in February. So in the build-up to COP15 and Impact 5, the outcomes of today's conference will better inform and mobilize us all. International mobilization is undeniably required. SDG 14's fifth target, to conserve at least 10% of coastal marine areas of the world, missed its 2020 marker. We now have only 3 months to go before CBD COP15 in Montreal convenes, where, if all goes well, parties will agree to protect, as I said, at least 30% of the planet's lands, rivers, lakes, wetlands, and the ocean by 2030. This agreement is vital, again that word, if we are to prevent mass extinctions and bolster our resilience to the climate changes that are upon us. The approach to COP15 in Montreal and Impact 5, we need runs on the board to show the world that we can do the impossible. Through 2,000 intervening years, the words of the Roman natural philosopher Pliny the Elder have been affirmed. How many things are looked upon as quite impossible until they're done. As a star performer, hosting the largest MPA in the North Atlantic, in what is a truly globally significant contribution, the Selvagens Islands have got it done. Se Deus quiser, I'll be standing in the Selvagens Islands tomorrow, witnessing in person the unsullied wonder of the nature reserve and its surrounding MPA. I look forward thereafter to beating the drum for the great consummation of the Regional Government of Madeira's Selvagens Islands Marine Protected Area. May its name resonate around the world as a paradigm to be emulated by the community of nations. Thank you.